Hello and welcome to In the Court of the Wenton Knave. We're doing King Crimson. These are all these albums that we're going to do here. We are really doing all of these albums. I think there'll be 86 episodes altogether, although we've actually done the last one already. We are on Islands. We've got to Islands. Episode 10. The fourth album. The final in the Peter Sinfield quadrilogy. Maybe there's a bit of a thing going on with the elements. I think in the court is fire, in the wake is water, lizard is land, maybe. But islands is air, I think so that works. There's a, much like Lizard, it's a controversial album. There's a bit of a yin and a yang thing with Lizard and Islands, I think. Some people think it's a bit of a mess. There was all sorts of things with getting the band together, which I'll talk about in a minute. I think it's awesome, actually. I really like this album and don't think much of Lizard. And some people are the other way around. Some people think the first three albums are the definitive albums, which baffles me completely. I think this is wonderful. It's very well recorded as well, which is great. I think there's a reason for that. I think in Lizard you've got the classical notions of composer, in that the music was directed, the musicians were directed. There was improvisation, but they were allowed like 2 bars, and then you know, Fripp or Sinfield had to check to make sure it was right, and then do another 2 bars, and sort of stick it together and sort of construct it in the studio. Whereas this is a recording of a band playing it. It's a different band. They haven't tried to force them to sound like something they shouldn't, to a certain extent. But I think it's great. It's been compared to Miles Davis. I think that was Peter Sinfield's thing. That's where he thought King Crimson should go. I understand that, actually. I think that's a good thing. I think actually that was a good idea. As it turned out, Fripp didn't agree, but that was also a good idea, because what his idea was amazing. But here we get a little snapshot of that as well, so it's not like we didn't get it. We got both. And when I say Miles Davis, I mean Sketches of Spain, In a Silent Way stuff, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think people who like Islands, like bands playing generally like jazz, the chamber thing, as opposed to epic produced auteurs work by one person, forcing the other musicians to play the notes I have written. I think music is about performance as much as about composition, and I don't see it being about production. People would argue it's flawed. I don't think it's flawed. Maybe it is flawed. Is it flawed? It's not as good as What's to Come. But that doesn't matter. On its own, I think it's great. Mel Collins is still in the band and plays some of his best stuff. I'm so glad he's still in the band, because they actually went on tour as well. He is the star of these 3 albums, there's no doubt, even though he's only on 2 songs in the way. We have Ian Wallace, who was actually Andy McCulloch's flatmate, as it happened. And he'd played with John Anderson in a band called The Warriors, and was briefly in the Bonzo Dog Doodah band as well, so he'd been around, you know, he wasn't an unknown. I really sense that Ian Wallace has a sense of humour, a Python-esque sense of humour, not just because of, well, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. I think it's in his playing as well, and I think it really suits King Crimson in a way. People disagree with that because he's not a very Crimson-y drummer. In some ways he's a very traditional drummer, but I really like that. It does make him stand out, you know, whereas Ian McCulloch didn't get a chance to do his own thing. He was told, you have to sound like Michael Giles. And it is more traditional, but that's okay. We also have Boz Burrell. Now, Boz was brought in as a singer. He's a heavy singer, and I can see why they went for him. They needed someone who could really sing 21st Century Schizoid Man, and they had so many people fainting trying to sing it and all this kind of stuff, so they need someone with that kind of voice. So I can understand where they got him from. He's certainly coming from a different direction, and it does look like, in a way, he's like Haskell in that he likes American music. He did a lot of scatting on tour and really brought that sort of American influence in there. He's got such a heavy voice, but he'd been around as well. He did a lot of stuff in the 60s, I think, with Joe Meek. Don't quote me on that, because he played some. He had a record under the name of Boz, and Richie Blackmore was on it, and it's on one of his compilation things. But they couldn't get a bass player, and Fripp offered the bass playing part to John Wetton. Yes. Who turned it down because I think he saw what Fripp was doing he was trying to balance it because he got these people who like American stuff. He needed someone with a European sensibility to balance it back again, I suppose. And for that reason, Weston thought that felt uncomfortable with that, so he turned it down. More on that later, obviously. So basically, the band was sitting there screwed. They didn't have a bass player, but Boz picked up the bass and started twanging, and they must have heard something. He must have had enough musicality to show that he could do it, because people talk about the bass playing. You know, he's not some Tony Levin character, obviously, but there's nothing wrong with the bass playing. It's a bit wobbly early on in the live stuff, but it grounds it, keeps it earthbound, which is good, which makes it different, you know. But he had to learn the bass. Fripp basically taught him to play bass, and of course that was a brilliant thing for him because he ended up in Bad Company. Didn't really talk about King Crimson after that, but he ended up in Bad Company on bass, not on vocals, obviously. I think it's something to do with his vocal style. He's rhythmic. It's the American thing, which lends itself to bass, I think. Maybe I'm stretching it a bit there, I don't know. Peter Sinfield's still here with the VCS synthesizer, which thankfully takes a back seat on this album. That's good. It didn't on tour, unfortunately. They'd already done a UK tour, which obviously I'll talk about in the next couple of weeks. So they've done a tour, and this is a band. I think that was a good idea to do a tour first. They saw the advantage of having it as a band first. It is a controlled band, they're being told not to play. It's still Fripp and Sinfield. But I hear their personalities on here. It grew into something else later on, but we'll talk about that. They moved to a different studio, and the sound is massively better. The thing about them taking ages to get a drum sound was because the studio just didn't have a good drum sound. This has a great drum sound, so that's good. It is an American album. It's Crimson doing American music, old American music, or 20th century American music, not quite like what it became. So that in that sense unique and important. I mean, I'm glad they split, because obviously we got what we got, and if we hadn't got what we got, we might not have got what we next got, or what we next got. But it is great, and the tour is great. Don't diss it. It's great. You're wrong. It's better. It's good. The album starts with Formentera Lady. Change in tradition. Doesn't start with like a quiet bit and then a heavy thing. We've got a 10-minute intro, if you like, a build-up. It's quiet and gentle. Very Miles Davis. Boz is great at the soft stuff. There's an edge to it. It may be a sarcastic edge. I don't know. He didn't like the soft stuff. He called it fairy music. Things like Lady of the Dancing Water and things like that. But he still did them. I really like Jacko's take on this song. He hasn't. I don't know whether he's done it with King Crimson or not, but he's done it with the 20th Century Schizoid Band. I really like the way he sings it. Although I really like Boz as well. He's great. This also has a female vocalist at the end, and it's really good. I really like it, and obviously it goes together with the next track. And those two, I think those two should go together. And they don't always go together, but I think they should go together. Fripp doesn't like it. I do like it. Track 2 is probably the highlight of the album. The one people go to, the one people talk about when they talk about this period, is The Sailor's Tale. Absolutely awesome live, and yet the album version is definitive. Unlike with previous albums where they haven't been able to get the definitive sound of the band down, they did here. And obviously there's some great live versions which are different or energetic or whatever. That's the one. If you say, what does The Sailor's Tale sound like? Just play that. You don't need to say, well, there's a live version and that's it. One of the reasons is that there was a moment of spontaneity, a moment of awesome, which was unplanned. Live, the guitar solo was some sustained Fripp stuff, so very traditional Fripp, very good. And through sitting there depressed, not feeling that anything was really happening, somehow he just came out with this idea of kind of doing a sort of banjo solo on the guitar. Not really a sign of things to come, but some of the rhythmic stuff in Lark's Donald's 1 has a lineage there, I think. A moment in time of awesome. And that shouldn't take anything away from Mel Collins' fantastic sax playing and the cool rhythm. And like I said, it's not really like anything else, partially because the drumming is in a way more traditional. But it's just a really good track. It belongs on a King Crimson compilation. Track 3 is The Letters. Now you must recall me talking about Drop In, or Why Don't You Just Drop In by the 69 Band. This is a new version of that with new lyrics. I prefer Drop In. I prefer Greg Lake's delivery, DeBoz's delivery of it. But it's also, I think part of that problem is the lyrics are kind of really heavy-handed. Impaled on nails of ice. The best bit is Mel Collins. The best bit is Mel Collins. And obviously it's the heavy sax stuff. The magic isn't there like the 69 band, and obviously there you get to directly compare, I suppose. So there you go. Track 4 is Ladies of the Road. Fairly unique in the catalogue, or was unique in the catalogue until later on things started to reference it. The music reflects the lyrics. It's a crimson blues. It's not just a blues, a messed up blues, a crimson blues. There's a really nice bit with a harmony. Do, 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 do. Very Beatles-esque. I think Crimson does the Beatles. Well, Adrian Belew is rather good at that, if you listen to Dinosaur or something like that. And I think that there's a lineage there. Probably unintentional, actually, because it's what Belew is bringing to the table himself. That's the end of the first side of the record. So we turn the record over, and we have the Prelude, Song of the Gulls. It is an orchestral piece. It's completely orchestral. I think conducted by Fripp. Dates back to Giles and Fripp, actually. And it's okay. Meh. There's a sense of them filling up the album. There isn't much space on the album. It's okay. It seems a shame to take up so much album space with something that's alright, you know. But it does. The idea is it leads into Islands. This is another Miles Davis-y bit. It is wonderful because it's melancholy. They haven't tried to do a big finale like they've already done twice or 3 times. It's a coda to the 4 albums. It's a coda to Peter Sinfield's time in the band. Wonderful melancholy. Again, Boz's delivery of the soft stuff is fantastic, whether he believes in it or not. Unlike Gordon Haskell, who I think sounds unconvincing. Boz is brilliant at it. There's an element of irony to the fact that it's kind of the concept of no man's an island, and it's at the end of Peter Sinfield's tenure with the band. So he became an island, obviously, and went off and did his solo album, but then joined the LP. Wonderful sax solo. Some wonderful piano. It's restrained, so it's his key tippet, but he's not doing his stuff. And the oboe in the corner from Robin Miller and Mark Charig. There's no pretension here. Whereas I think Lizard, there was elements of Lizard which are pretentious. I think this is they're just doing the music that came from wherever it came from, and part of that is it's not production. They're not creating a produced thing. They're just recording the band. It's just playing. And bizarrely, the album actually ends. It doesn't end on this wonderful ending. There's a bit of studio chatter and the Fripp getting ready to conduct the orchestra, counting them in, which is, I can see what they're doing there about sort of at the end saying, yeah, but this is how it's made. There's nothing magical happening here, which changed the vibe a bit, but that's interesting. Yeah, so that's Islands. It's a great album. I really, 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 really like it. See you next week for Plymouth. Plymouth?